I'm not dead. I know it's been a while. I haven't done, well, fuck all, really. Some stupid 2-minute, bloopers video that really wasn't that fantastic. Just, I got bored one day. But it's a funny time of day, year at work. I was plowing snow in the winter. Never knew when the hell I had to work. And I still don't really know when the hell I have to work, because sometimes we do daytime stuff, sometimes we do nighttime stuff, sometimes we go fix plow damage. It's just all over the place. So yeah, I've been busy. Sleep's been all off, shit got put on the back burner. Also didn't help that I got demonetized because I'm not big enough for the YouTube robots to want to give me money anymore. Not that I'd ever received a paycheck. I still haven't reached the payout threshold. So maybe someday, but as it stands, I think you have to have something like 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 minutes of watch time a month or something like that. And I currently stand at 122 subscribers and about, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 minutes a month, not hours. I think it has to be hours. I don't know. It's a big frickin' number anyway. It's way more than I get. So, that sucks, I guess. Gonna have to keep working a bit longer and hopefully trying to get more people on board to try and make a thing out of this. Maybe someday be able to afford editing software that's a little bit fancier than SHAREfactory and GTA Rockstar Editor. And if you're wondering if you've been one of the few people that watch my Bloodborne and Darkness series, that's all I use to make it, is SHAREfactory and GTA Rockstar Editor. So if you're a budding film person and you want to make some cool shit, you can go pretty far with it. I mean, you can make some pretty cool shit. There's a game called Dreams coming out for the PS4 at some point. Although it's been so damn long since I heard about it, it's starting to feel like a dream. But it lets you create everything from the ground up. Gameplay mechanics, cinematics, characters, everything, music. So I think that may be kind of cool, and it'll let me do some crazy shit. So hopefully when that comes out, you'll see some new content on my channel as far as the artistic stuff goes. And every now and again I'll still do a gameplay video, so because I am a gamer. I might be fucking old and worn out and work a day regular Joe most of the time, but ever since my first game of Pac-Man, I've been hooked. That's why I do this. Because I think there are other they don't have to be old, but mature, intelligent gamers that are good people that enjoy, a benevolent environment to surround themselves in when it comes to gaming, and that can be hard to find in this world, in this day and age in general. As a species, we're a very long way from being at peace with each other, globally speaking and geographically speaking and racially and culturally speaking. Our ideologies and our beliefs and our views of the world are still disparate enough that we come to blows over it on a regular basis. And we still value things like money and objects more than they should be valued. And again, we come to blows over such things. And sometimes it's over necessity, food, clothing, etc. Sometimes it's over the incepted need for stupid things. I remember when fancy sneakers was the big thing. And you'd hear in the news stories all the time about people killing each other over a pair of shoes, because the shoes themselves were too fucking expensive for any normal person to afford. Not because they were shoes that were any more amazing than a $30 pair of sneakers, just because the artificial need for them had been instilled in people through, media programming. Anyway, that's not at all what I wanted to start this Squirrel about, although there was going to be a bit in the middle where I talked about, us being in the middle of kind of a cycle and being apart and not getting along as a true global community. We're more like a dysfunctional global family, and we still, have abusive relatives and good relatives and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so this Squirrel was supposed to be about two things. I'm not dead, hey, I'm not dead. And the curious case of human evolution. See, the funny thing about human evolution, let's assume, my point of view, and this is just my opinion, I happen to think it's a fairly well-researched opinion, not on my part, but on the part of many, many scientists, generations before me and currently, who do things like paleontology and archaeology, etc., and genealogy, and DNAology, or whatever the fuck, anyway. So, you don't have to believe me, and it's fine if you don't. You're welcome to your own perspective. But I thought I'd let you in on mine, and why I think human evolution is a curious thing. Ostensibly speaking, we all started from the same ancestral line, or the same progenitor species, Homo erectus, or I think Neanderthals were a different species, although convergent, like dogs and wolves kind of thing. Only recently separated from one another, or not far separated from one another. But the Neanderthals didn't make it for whatever reason, and the species that did make it is, as far as we know, the species that gave rise to our own, which, due to many factors, for example, environmental, as the globe split apart and the land masses moved around due to tectonic processes, and our environment went through gradual changes. We began to change. We began to develop language. And it used to be simple things, gestures, grunts, mimicking, I don't know, how cavemen, for an easy term to use for primitive people, communicated, or where language started. So then we started being able to share our views of the world and how we saw things and what we thought about stuff and our opinions. And we began to individuate personally to more, deeper and more variegated consciousnesses, individual beings with individual minds and wants and desires and dreams and experiences in the world. And it's not that we necessarily chose these different experiences, it was just that the world we've been born into and evolved in is in itself very chaotic and changeable, and we as a species, because we have the intelligence and the sense of sentience, I suppose, of wanting to continue to exist and to shape the world in some way. Fucking sidetracked. God damn it. This is kind of, you guys kind of know the drill. It's a wide point. I get lost in the woods sometimes looking for the right tree to talk about, to tell somebody how to get through the woods to the house I want to show them, so to speak. I'm going to take a deep breath and, do one of them video cut things so I don't get cut off the 15-minute mark. So yeah, as a species, we've split apart. We've changed genetically in some ways, although the differences are so small from one race to the next that there is no fundamentally real difference. Which is something I wish that people keep insisting from a racist point of view, that the genetic differences, one's better than the other, or whatever. No. Learn about genetics, please, and stop the pointless hatred. There is a difference in the races, and sometimes it is quite noticeable. For example, a person from, Zimbabwe in Africa tends to have very dark skin. Well, they get a lot of a particular wavelength of sunlight being very close to the equator or on the equator. And genetically speaking, their bodies have evolved to produce high content of melanin in the skin from birth to protect them from that sun. Otherwise, they would sunburn all the time. If they had babies that were born as snow white as my hairy Finnish French ass, they'd burn up, and then the babies would have very little chance of surviving unless, the parents understood enough about what was going on to keep the child out of the sun. And I don't know if that sort of knowledge would evolve quickly enough to allow the survival of the human species in an environment that requires that kind of protection from the sun. So they're very dark-skinned. My ancestry tends to be very light-skinned because we come from, northern parts of the hemisphere. I take more after my father, I think, genetically than my mom. and I tend to be quite pale. I tan fine, but, I don't ever really get beyond the point of, let's say, a loaf of bread that's been baked nicely. Anyway, different physiologies for different environments. The Inuit people that live in the north of my country, and probably the north of other places, although they may have different names for themselves, live on an almost exclusively protein-based diet. And they're fine. They're healthy people when they're living on the diet they evolved to eat. Whereas people from certain parts of Asia, like of certain Asian descents, that come from cultures where they have a heavy rice and fish intake. Well, because of the heavy rice intake, rice isn't really high in nutrition, really. It's hard to get nutrition out of it. So those people, their small intestine is actually 1.5 times the length of ours. I don't know how much longer that makes it exactly, but it's generally speaking, I say ours, I speak from my own perspective. Like your typical Finnish, French, northern Caucasian type person. We tend to be slightly more omnivorous, although I'm much more of a carnivore than my mother, who's, straight up both sides, French, genetically speaking. Where she was happy with a much more, fish and vegetable-based, fish, vegetable, and fruit diet. And to be honest, that just gave me the shits all the time. I wasn't happy on that kind of a diet. I couldn't do it. Plus, different environments give us different experiences. We have different tales to tell. An Inuit legend would be all about snow and wind and cold and the northern lights and the different colors of ice and the things the icebergs say to each other when they crack in the night. Hey, close up. This is my beauty side. What am I walking into? Oh, pay station. I gotta pay my parking ticket anyway. A person who grew up in the plains of the Serengeti would talk about lions instead of polar bears, and I don't know what the hell else lives out there. Gazelles and shit. And perhaps a good example of the different ways different cultures and people who live in different kinds of environments would perceive the world is, and this is an anecdotal story, I don't have any proof for it, I can't even remember the source, but I do remember somewhere reading or hearing once that once there was some people from a very isolated Amazonian tribe. They lived in the jungle, had no idea about modern human beings' culture. They had only just met the first white people and seen a cigarette lighter for the first time, and damn near killed the white person because they thought he was some kind of demon or something for being able to produce fire that way. Anyway, they brought these jungle-dwelling people out into somewhere where there was plains, and I think they saw bison or cows or something off in the distance, and supposedly the people from the rainforest asked what kind of insects those were. And it took a great deal of explaining and eventually, taking them out to these animals, cows or bisons, whatever the hell they were, so they could see that they weren't insects. They were just something that was so far away it looked like an insect. And the reason that they were confused is the farthest you can see in the jungle anywhere in any direction is probably about 10 feet. If you see something that small, it's probably an insect 10 feet away from you. Because the insects in the rainforest are the size of fucking dinner plates, right? They had never learned to perceive that way, so their view of the world was much more small. On a more personal note, my mom was a teacher, and she had exchange students come from the prairies, towards the western end of my country, where it's completely flat from horizon to horizon. The joke is, if your dog runs away, you don't call the dog catcher for 3 days, because that's how long it takes him to get out of sight. And anyway, these students had come from there, and they'd come to the eastern end, Nova Scotia, New Scotland, my part of Canada, where it's very hilly, and the trees go close to the road, and sometimes overhang the road, and the roads are always windy. And it's sort of like, the jungle in that respect. You can only ever see so far down the road. And quite often your view of the sky is only a little strip above you, or, a much narrower point of perspective than the kids from the prairies were used to. And a couple of them were on a bus trip through a part of my province that is specifically very windy and tight like that, hilly. And they looked uncomfortable. My mom asked them, what's wrong? And they were both feeling claustrophobic. They're like, how can you stand this? And my mom was like, what do you mean? She's like, you can't see where you're going. You can't see the sky. They felt like they were trapped in a closet driving down this road. And it was simply because they'd spent their entire lives in the prairies and had only ever seen wide vistas and open skies all the time. Natives of that area, I believe, called it Big Sky, although I might be thinking of the American prairies. But either way, the native peoples of this land had different borders than we do, if they even believed in things like borders. I'm not as culturally up on that as perhaps I could be. Point being, we've differentiated as a species. We've gone our different ways. We pray to different gods, or don't. We believe different things about the world. Some of them proven, some of them not. Some of them based on cultural preconceptions. We are disparate and separate. We look different. We act different. We speak different. We think differently, and we perceive differently. Fundamentally, we all want the same things, I suppose. No, that's not true. Fundamentally, we all need the same things. Food, shelter, clothing, companionship. We are a social species. Do we need to procreate to survive? Do we need to pass on what we know about surviving in order to keep those procreates going so they can procreate in turn? Procreations? Whatever. Kids. But as we grow as a species, as we shrink the world by building machines that allow us to travel ever faster and cover ever greater distances with less and less effort, maybe someday to other planets in our own solar system, we'll be, flying to Mars will be like taking a plane to New York. No big fucking deal, right? Your average middle-income kind of person can make a vacation there, maybe perhaps once in their lifetime, without going broke in the process. So we are able now, through telecommunications and the internet and flying and satellites, to be able to communicate on a global scale. Well, on a nearly global scale. There are some people who just don't have access to these things, and there are some people who still don't even know that airplanes are a thing. They just wonder sometimes at the shiny birds they see flying overhead that make the strange noise and don't flap their wings. But as we immigrate and emigrate to and from different countries, into different countries and out of different countries, and you have people of Arabian descent meeting people of Caucasian descent, meeting people of black descent, of native descent from whatever country. It could be Maori, it could be Polynesian, could be Native Canadian, Native American, Inuit, Mongolian, I don't know, wherever. Damn it. Multicultural squirrel. Recognizable by his rainbow fur. Anyway, fuck, I really lost my point there, didn't I? Alright, I'm just gonna pull over here for a sec. I'll do the 15-minute thing again. It feels like I've been rambling for a long time, so just give me a second. Okay, so, internet. We're all to the point now where we're beginning to be able to talk to each other. And we do. Half the time it's arguing and online bullying, trolling, the screaming of our opinions at each other, trying to prove the other one wrong, rather than sharing our opinions and trying to find what's the same. Where do our communications and our beliefs and our ideologies and our wants and desires line up? What can we all agree on? Maybe some people don't need to be convinced that they're wrong. They just simply need to be taught what they don't know. And we're getting to a point culturally and maybe 50% global scale. I don't know how many people in the world have access on a percentage basis to telecommunications. But let's be middle of the road and say 50%. So 4 or 5 billion people can talk to each other now. Some of us are speaking peacefully and sharing ideas and enjoying other cultures and points of view. You know, some of us play online with people from all over the world, and we don't give a shit where they're from, and we learn about other cultures that way. Existing in bodies that may or may not have any resemblance to our actual physical bodies. A place where race and gender is not necessarily a reflection of the person behind the face, nor is it in real life, but here it's like it driving the point home perhaps a bit more, although some don't see it. Anyone playing a female character in GTA can tell you that you do get treated different. And it's almost pointless trying to convince people you're not female. Anyway, but that's a different point. Fucking female GTA character, Squirrel. Fuck. But as we intermingle, as, you know, interracial coupling no longer becomes a thing that needs a separate word other than, hey, there's a couple. They're probably banging and having kids, you know, at the very least banging. It's a clash of cultures. A remixing of the human genetic code back into something that may become more homogeneous. There will probably always be environmental factors that lead to differences in people, because, you know, let's face it, people aren't going to move to a different country every time they want to have a kid. People tend to stay in areas that is comfortable for their bodies, that is what they're familiar with, that they've come to enjoy. Some people move elsewhere and really enjoy that place more. Perhaps it feels more like home to them. Perhaps it resonates with some old part of their genetic code. Perhaps it resonates to a previous life, you know, if that sort of thing exists. Who knows? But the point I'm trying to make is human evolution started from a single place, a single lineage, branched apart, created all these different points of view and ways of explaining those points of view. Okay. Alright. Was this Alice in fucking Wonderland? Oh, okay. Anyway. And we split apart into all these different races and different cultures and different genealogies and ways of appearing and different physical traits. But as we stretch out communicatively and shrink our world mechanically and begin to intermingle all those different things into a collective again, and if that happens on a global scale, and especially if we start to inhabit things like space, you know, our environment may be so controlled by us that we no longer need to genetically adapt to it, and the mixing of all of our different genealogies will sort of reach a homogeneous balance, and we will again become one single species, one race. And that perhaps is a more optimistic way of looking at the one race thing than perhaps, you know, somebody crazy asshole like Adolf Hitler would look at it. Because I think he took that whole idea the wrong fucking way, and it didn't go well for, well, the whole planet, basically. But it's an interesting thought. From one into one. And if, you know, you think like you believe as I do that your physical form and the way your genetics inform your body and its reactions to the environment, and the way your own personal experience has formed your psyche, whether that be from you living the life you're living, previous lives, I don't know, dreams, whatever happens to you, you know, makes you, helps shape who you are, and your past experiences, you know, is kind of you in a way. It's the soul you look into every time you look in the mirror at yourself, every time you imagine yourself. Hopefully one sees oneself truthfully rather than in a psychotic manner. Fuck. Psychological issues, Squirrel? Sure, why not? We all have some of those. Nobody's perfect. Oh yeah, right. So, if we're all in similar bodies and have similar worldviews because we've finally figured it out or agreed upon a consensus, you know, based on empirical evidence rather than flights of fancy, let's say, then we may all resonate to such a level that we can communicate on a telepathic or psychic level more easily, perhaps. That if we get to the point where we evolve past our human bodies, having homogenized into a single community, then it may aid the transition. We'll be so used to existing in an agreed upon reality that the shift from one state to the next won't cause chaotic points of view to chaotify a reality that may be more easily formed and shaped by the minds perceiving it, because it's not locked in a physical sort of process. I mean, that's a whole other squirrel, but I like to think that we're going somewhere as a species, or have the potential to. And I think that maybe is a potential interesting way of looking at our evolution and where it may take us. Embrace the mixing. We're all still individuals. But I think we can all agree that a tree is a tree without taking the fun out of life, right? I think we can all agree that the ground is under our feet, fucking space is up, without shooting missiles at each other. I think we can all agree that maybe we don't know exactly how everything fucking wound up the way it wound up, but if we stop and think about it, there's a logical way of finding out. Sometimes maybe it's not important, it's where we're going, not where we've been, Like, fuck, is it that hard to get? Why can't we all just get along, man? Sounds hokey, but I think it's a good thing to wish for. Anyway, I think I'm gonna go somewhere and have a puff and think about shit. So, be excellent to one another. Don't stop thinking. Have a good one.